Hey, join me. If you watch the news, if you listen to the news, if you tune into podcasts, you know that things are difficult. You know that people are talking about inflation, wage rises being restricted or kept at smaller levels than ever before, and about the cost of living and the surging prices of rent, transport, food, and the cost of finance. With interest going up, of course your finance is going to cost you a lot more. Today I want to look at some of the numbers that have been bandied around personal finance in the United States and using that as a model for its impact on other areas of the world. Wherever you live, the cost of finance globally has increased, and so it's making life difficult. But it's making life difficult predominantly for the people who have no savings, who have very few investments, and whose disposable income is either flatlining or, quite significantly, is falling towards lower levels. Research by the Gallup organization suggests that in the United States, a low-income family has up to or less than $40,000 a year on which to live, on which to survive. Having interviewed thousands of people, the Gallup researchers found over the last quarter that those families who are on $40,000 a year or less figure that they need as much as $60,000 a year in which to survive at a comfortable level. Not an affluent level, not a rich level, but to be at a comfortable level, which means that they can cover their costs every single month and continue into the next month. In the same survey, upper income households are deemed to be those that earn up to or no more than $100,000 a year. And those households are saying very clearly to the researchers, we need $100,000 to live on. We cannot survive on less than $100,000 a year. In those two examples of the upper income households and the lower income households, the researchers deem that a household is up to 2 adults and up to 2 children. How have those figures changed over the years? Well, in 2013, it was deemed that $58,000 a year would be enough to create a good living for a household of 4. Think about the fact that nowadays low-income households are saying, no, we need a minimum of $66,000 a year to survive comfortably and to cope with the bills that we need to maintain our family, to maintain our household. There's a huge difference between a real figure of $40,000 for a low-income family and the $58,000 that people said they needed 5 years ago, and of course back up to the $66,000 that those low-income families are saying we need that right now. The well-known MIT, or the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has incredible brains looking at all manner of things which are of great scientific interest, great intellectual interest, but really of greatest importance right now, this year, they have what's called a living wage calculator. MIT makes some assumptions, and I'm not sure I agree with those, and I'll tell you why in just a couple of moments. MIT assumes that the average household will allocate half of their after-tax income to basic living costs. Basic living costs are deemed to be food, accommodation, transport to and from work, transport to and from school. That's why they call it the basics. Those are the essentials that we need to live. A roof over our head, food on the table, and the ability to go out and earn income from often the most basic of jobs, but that is basic living. And MIT say 50% of after-tax income is going to those things. They then say that 30% of that after-tax income is being spent by average families on discretionary spending. That means what they choose to spend their money on. Things that are not important, things that are not necessary, but things that make life better. That can include very random things like home decoration, interior purchases for the house, the cost of streaming and cable services, buying laptops or phone technology for the household, and taking an annual holiday. So MIT have identified 50% for basic living, 30% for discretionary spending, and that leaves 20%. MIT are suggesting that that 20% is spent on savings and debt servicing. What we're going to look at in a minute is the fact that the reality is that much of that is going on debt servicing and very little is going on saving. Think about what we said at the beginning. It's the absence of saving funds, the absence of a buffer, a financial wall to protect you, that is causing the distress and the dissatisfaction and the enormous sense of frustration with the economy at the moment, is because most households don't have that protection. Another area where people are having discretionary spending, i.e. things that they have the discretion not to spend on, the choice not to spend on or to spend money on, is in cars. At the end of last year, the value of an average new vehicle in the States was $49,500. Remember that your average low-income family in the United States earns up to $40,000 a year, that the average upper-income family in the United States earns up to $100,000 a year, and yet last year the average cost of a brand new vehicle bought at a dealership was $49,500. That figure is up from just under $39,000 3 years ago. That's a huge increase by the car industry, by the manufacturers of vehicles looking to sell, largely on finance, the vehicles that they are producing and stockpiling at a faster rate than people are actually buying them. You might remember that in a previous video talking about the theme of frugality and minimalism and thoughtful spending for your household, for your family, I mentioned the fact that we had recently bought a second-hand Ford truck that cost us just under $8,000. We fully expect in our family to keep that truck for at least 3 years, with regular servicing every 3 or 4 months, changing the tyres every year. Every time we go and buy gas, we ask for the tyres to be checked, for the oil levels to be looked at, and for the water levels to be assessed or topped up. One of the biggest problems we face is that people expect a new vehicle. People expect to have a house that is the same size or better than the house they grew up in as teenagers. The constant expectation that things should be better than they were when we were kids has caused enormous problems, because more and more people are pushing things on credit, buying things on a take away now but pay later process, which goes completely against the principles of being frugal and being thoughtful with your spending. If most of the savings in the United States are held within the upper echelons of American society and the highest earning households, the figures for the remainder are drastic. They're very, very stark. For example, the average savings balance in the lower income households in the States as of last quarter was $5,500 or less. Zippia.com has a really good website with lots of really useful statistics and detail and information about income, about savings. We've looked a little bit at information from the Gallup poll organization. I've shared some statistics from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. Zippia.com is primarily a website for job search, for recruitment, for finding access to better paid jobs. And this isn't a sponsored reference at all. It was just a useful place to find information about savings within the US economy and amongst US households. But 42% of American households have less than $1,000 in savings. That means that if your air conditioning fails, that if there is a minor piece of damage to your car that you think is important to get repaired, or if there is a call on your finances to clear a personal debt or some aspects of your credit card finance, if there's less than $1,000 in savings, you are really up the creek without a paddle. You are really going to struggle to find that $1,000. Here are some more statistics. Amongst those households who have savings, the average is $41,600. A very different figure, less rosy, is the median figure. And the median literally means the midpoint between an upper set of numbers and a lower set of numbers. The median savings across the whole of American society is $5,300. But here's where it gets really scary. 20% of the population have up to $50,000 in savings. 5% of the population have between $25,000 and $50,000. 8% have between $10,000 and $25,000 in savings. 9% have between $5,000 and $10,000 in savings. 16% have between $1,000 and $5,000, and that figure from before, 42 have less than $1,000 in savings. If this is not a wake-up call, I do not know what is. If you've ever doubted the need to be frugal, if you've ever been unsure of the need to be thoughtful about your spending and your accumulation of money and building up of an emergency fund first, then a savings account, now is the time. That's the evidence. This is the information which may be your wake-up call. This is the information which might just push you forward into a change of situation, into a change of behavior, and I hope it does. It's time to start saving. It's time to put aside a percentage of everything that comes into your household and to build, first of all, that £1,000 emergency fund, and then to use your income so that your savings pot grows from above 1,000 to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and you see your levels of stress decline and you see your belief in yourself increase, because you know that you can put money aside month after month after month. You can look at those news reports and interpret them the way that they are delivered, perhaps with a very negative slant, with a very much fear-mongering, this is the end of the American dream type of message. Or you can instead say, okay, I don't have a $1,000 emergency fund. Let's start that process and put the money aside, this paycheck, that paycheck, the next paycheck, so that you build up that buffer. It will be difficult if you've gone through years of earnings so far and haven't created that $1,000 buffer. Build the buffer, build that financial protection from just $1,000, and see that with more than $1,000 in savings, you have just entered 16% of American society who has between $1,000 and $5,000 of money set aside. Take it beyond that and build up your emergency fund so that it's strong and you can park it to one side. You practice frugal living. You think, okay, can I pay myself first every payday and put aside 5% or 10% at least every single month from your paycheck? To start with, it will be difficult. Focus on $100, $250, $500. Make that progress. Put the money in an account where it's difficult to get to. Put the money in an envelope and hide it somewhere in the house. Put that money aside so that when you need it, you can, with a sigh of relief, say, it's okay, I've got that $1,000 for this unexpected large bill that we have to pay. Go beyond the emergency fund. Create a bigger buffer by building up to $2,000 and $3,000 and $5,000 and more, but you do it payday to payday to payday, and you take that money and you put it into a savings account. Think about the interest rates. The bad news is if you've borrowed money, your cost of finance will increase next month and the month after. If there's another base rate change, your cost of borrowing will go up. But on the good side, if you've got savings in an account, you're going to get 3.5%, 4.5%, 5% interest from the financial organization that you are lending your money to by having it on deposit. If you're prepared to build up your savings cushion, to build that financial protection for you and your family, for you and your household, then you're going to be in a much better place. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is that huge numbers of single millennials who are earning as much as $100,000 a year are struggling to get by. They don't know how to survive on $100,000 a year. That's $8,000 a month or $2,000 a week, and they're struggling. Why are they struggling? Because they think this is going to last forever. So they spend and they spend and they spend, and when a recession comes along, when the cost of borrowing goes up, when the car dealerships put their prices up every year, knowing that most people will need to sign on the dotted line to drive away with a new car, those same young millennials, because they're caught in the financial borrowing trap, they are stuck. And that's why they are saying, as single individuals, we can't cope on $100,000 a year. Change the response. Start to say, okay, I'm getting paid a regular wage, a regular salary. I'm going to put aside this portion every payday, every paycheck, every time my salary comes in. I'm putting some money into a separate account that is not my day-to-day expenses account. I'm making it difficult to access, or I'm simply grown up enough to say that money goes into another account and it's there for my future affluence. It's there for my long-term retirement. It's there for ease and comfort and the protection of my household, so that we are better off in the future than we are now. You and I don't want to see the financial news as something that affects us negatively. Instead, if you've got money in savings, your money will grow because of small amounts of interest. If you've got money aside from your emergency fund and you're putting that money into something, it might be stocks and shares, it might be an index fund, we don't just luck into having a good savings account. We put that money into another account and we build and we grow and we increase our savings month on month. That's how frugal living will support you, making a turn in your situation, building that financial protection and giving you the peace of mind that says, I'm saving regularly, I'm putting money aside. Bad things may be happening in the broader economy, but in my private economy, with my emergency fund and my savings and then my investment activity, I'm doing okay. Stay focused, continue to be thoughtful about your spending, and consider the value of frugal living as a great way forward.